This is not Minecraft. However, it did start out as a mod for Minecraft. It's just that over time, the scale and vision for the mod changed enough to the point where the developers decided to turn the mod into a full game of its own. Although if you look it up, just like Minecraft, you won't find it on Steam. The devs' reasoning behind this involves multiple factors, however, one chief among them is that the developers believe Steam's refund policy is too strict, and as such they want to allow players to play the game at least 20 hours before having to refund it instead of only 2. In addition to that, the game is still in early access, so they feel it may be more appropriate to wait until the game gets more fleshed out and possibly released into a full version to release on Steam. Another thing that may be keeping them from releasing the game on Steam may also be dedicated forums that you can use to discuss the game with other players and purchasable servers available via their website. Furthermore, the developers are active in their Discord community and are constantly trying to either add things to the game or fix bugs. Although I won't be covering it here, the newest build of the game recently released and has added some things to the game like deer and meese that quite frankly have added new life to the game just based on the trailer alone to me. That's only one of several new features they added in that update, which goes to show they are working hard to improve the game and show it off in the process. Not only that, but as my 9th grade AP World History teacher, quoting somebody else who was famous I'm sure, said, "History never repeats itself but often rhymes." The developers have adopted community-made mods as features for the game as recently as the new update 1.19, just as the game started out as a mod itself. Now that you have all this background information, if not Minecraft, what is it? It's still clearly a block game, don't get me wrong, however the main distinction at first lies in how far the game goes with those blocks. That is to say that this game utilizes something called voxels, which is almost like a fancy way of saying 3-dimensional pixels. Several processes involve utilizing them, however I will talk about those processes a little later. Apart from being able to break or create what is effectively in-game pixels into useful things, the main distinction from Minecraft lies in how it tackles realism and survival mechanics. For instance, you can't just start punching a tree and expect it to break a log and magically leave the tree floating in the air if you break the piece closest to the surface. Instead, you have to find a hard enough rock like flint to nap into shape with another rock to create a necessary item to progress, like an axe head, and punch some branchy tree leaves to get at least one stick before you can dream of chopping down any type of tree in the game. But once you make your crude axe, you can chop down an entire tree from the bottom and not have to worry about floating trees populating your world. Not only that, but your character can't just live off of rabbit meat forever, because in addition to having to keep up with your saturation like in Minecraft, you also have to keep up with your nutrition with things like calcium and protein intake. All this is to say that this game effectively borrows concepts from the real world more so than Minecraft, especially utilized in science. Another important distinction between Minecraft and this game is its slightly more focused concentration on its RPG elements and storyline. However, whenever I say storyline, I use the term very loosely in this context. If you're familiar with how games like Terraria tell their stories through dialogue with NPCs, the storyline is closer to this more so than anything else. However, there are in-game books and scrolls that elaborate on the world too. Unlike those games, in addition to the ruins you can find littered throughout the world, at the openings of caves, deep within them, on the surface, or even underwater. NPCs already live in your world whenever you spawn, which makes it feel like the world could continue to exist without your presence. In addition to their dialogue, they can trade valuable items to you in exchange for the in-game currency called gears that have something to do with the lore in addition to being in-game currency. However, I still don't know exactly what that thing is. If you recall me saying that this game is still in early access, I believe it doesn't have a clearly defined beginning and end in terms of its storyline CRPG mechanics at least. However, outside of the storyline, CRPG elements like player customization as soon as you spawn in the world and world customization options, which by the way I utilize in this review review for the game for the sake of my sanity, because you drop items on death by default, and because the game gives me the freedom to do so and actively encourages me to modify the game in a way I see fit. So I don't see anything wrong with turning keep inventory on death on. The main reason I bring this up is because the world map is so expansive that it makes traversal to your death location potentially dangerous and arduous at best, and I honestly don't want to deal with it. Now, with my rant out of the way, there's one more thing in relation to how this game was built like a CRPG I want to talk about. That is, this game was built with PCs in mind. What I mean by this is that things you wouldn't normally be able to do on games like Minecraft or even Skyrim, like opening multiple storage vessels at the same time, is possible in Vintage Story. Although I briefly mentioned this earlier in my discussion of the newest build of the game, the newest stable version of the game that I'm using already has a variety of content to discover without those additional updates. In addition to that, I also mentioned how this game heavily relies on real-life scientific principles. Well, that reliance surprisingly greatly expands the scope, scale, and massive content in the game, from variants of ores like copper and malachite based on their chemical composition differences, to the variety of ways you do certain things like panning for ores or finding them in mining ore deposits. Not only that, but it makes the process of getting wooden planks, for instance, much more challenging in the process of making it more realistic. You have to get past the Stone Age and into the Copper Age in order to make your dreams of getting wooden planks a reality, which doesn't sound too complicated until you realize that you have to not only pan for copper ore to smelt, but also make crucibles, at least one fiery clay mold of a tool, most prominently an axe head, and a charcoal pit to exceed the default max temperature for wood in a fire pit to make a copper pickaxe, in addition to grabbing some tree branches if you don't already have them. Not only that, but you must fire both an anvil and hammer mold, then gather enough copper to repeat the process of pouring the crucible into the fire molds, and then firing at least one ingot mold, and then gathering even more copper to put into the fired mold. That's not even mentioning that you must wait for these to cool off, in addition to wielding a crude form of tongs to keep yourself from burning to death from holding the crucible. However, one complaint that I do have about this is that you cannot use water like in real life to make this process a little faster by placing the crucible in water to cool it off, but I digress. Then finally, you can use the head of a hammer to craft a hammer, and subsequently warm up your metal again with a forge made of cobblestone, which by the way is crafted with soft stones you find on the ground like slate or granite and clay. Then place your warmed up metal on your anvil and select the saw blade, then finally use your hammer to mold it into the blade you desire from the voxels and wait for it to cool off to craft the saw. So as you can see, what may have seemed like a really simple process may have been more complicated than you thought. Not only that, but it makes learning fun in a way that not a lot of games have been done before. I go as far as to say that if I had to teach a class especially oriented around physics or chemistry and was instructed to use a video game as a learning tool, I would use this because so much of it replicates real-life scientific principles. From concepts like all rocks on Earth starting out as igneous in the rock cycle, to never having drilled past the mantle, which is true. In real life, we haven't dug past the crust, let alone the mantle. Not only that, but geologic formations like oxbow lakes, mountains, and limestone caves have a basis on real-life physical science in the game. So from the very beginnings of early human evolution, from Homo habilis in the Stone Age to Homo sapiens up until the early Industrial Age, to the more game-integrated lore monsters that are not real, this game has plenty of stuff to uncover that not only mimics real life, but also offers a challenging experience for those looking for a more hardcore survival game than Minecraft.